Hi, design pickers. My name is Matthew Seer, and today we're going to be jumping into Figma. We're going to be answering the core question: how can we use a design system to build and design our products? How can we then add back to the design system as we do so? We're going to be focusing on specifically how we can set up some, let's say, marketing communications that are going to be our email channels. Those email templates we're going to put together will support our onboarding experiences that we're designing. And then we're going to be able to then use those templates, put them back into the design system so we can continually reuse them throughout the other experiences that we build using some of the marketing and email templates that we put together. So if something like that interests you, then you're in the right place. Sit back, relax, and let's jump into the video. Wait, before we jump into the video, if you're enjoying the content so far, then please show your support by providing us a like, subscribing to the channel. It helps out a great deal. And as well, we have released the Pixellink Design System Proteus. We are at the moment having a promo. You'll be able to find the link to the Design System Proteus and a discount code. So go check it out. So without further ado, let's jump into the video. Okay, so what I have here is a collection of different types of emails that we can do at different points of the onboarding experience and other marketing and communications. You can identify the ones you'll need by, first of all, mapping out the different service flows. So we're going to start by taking some of the welcome emails, some of the activating accounts, password resetting, and so on. So let's jump into Figma. All right, so here we are inside of Figma. This is a template I put together. Ideally, this is where we should be able to get to. We should be able to put together the different types of blocks. We should be able to stack these blocks. We should be able to then turn them into reusable components. And we'll be able to do that by leveraging the design system itself. Over here, I'd started to basically block out all the different types of sections that we can have. But let's get started with tackling the welcome template. So in the welcome template up the top here, and in most templates, you'll notice that we both have this kind of starting banner. We usually have some sort of logo and potentially some sort of symbol or icon or graphic or image that's going to identify what this email is all about. We also follow up with a kind of message, and that message usually comes with some big headline text, and then we have some subtext. Now in this subtext area, it could also have some key things that are relevant to the email itself. Down here, I have a section. This section I have basically put together blocks of text. Now, the advantage of blocks of text like this will start to become a little bit more clear as we build these out and create the different variations. And then at the end, our email usually has basically a signature where it's come from a person saying who's it come from. We also will tackle some of those additional links to social media and follow up with just a logo to represent the brand, to keep it all consistent and tie it up together. So let's first of all, let's target what we can do at the top here. So first of all, I will reuse the element that I have. Now, ultimately, what I have done is I can grab our logo. This logo here is made up of my text block, and this might not be, you might just have a vector or an image, but I like to separate the two. I like to make sure that at least we can separate the icon, we can separate the actual name. This means that even if you were to create a new frame and we were to use this frame as a logo, what I will have would be the image block section 1, which will be my logo, and the second one could be that text strip. By separating the two, what I've done is I've made it more flexible. I can reuse this, and I can also reuse this here. So I usually start by just setting those up and applying the right types of sizing and padding using my different variable units. Once I've done that, now I have basically a reusable component, which I can actually just simply turn into a component. And I can also go at the top here and I can expose the actual name because this is text, which makes it much easier for me. I can expose that in the assets, meaning that over here, we can change that text to anything else. We can also change the size. The logo itself, what we can do in the asset down the bottom here is, as we have this actual fixed, we can make sure that at least it fills the height. So if I was to, for example, change the size, make sure, of course, that my text is being actual hugged, and the asset will also be hugging the content from left to right. We'll make sure of that. And we'll make sure that it's hugging the height. You can see that the logo maintains it's the same ratio because it has a fixed ratio and it is filling the height of the container. So now whatever I change the height of this, it will make sure that it is maintained within the height of the container. So now it's responsive. So that's fantastic. So I have a responsive logo. Happy days. There we go. Now we're building these all out into sections, into blocks. So that means that each block here is what's going to be converted into our HTML code. And we want to make sure that either it's filling completely from left to right so that we have some clean block HTML code to turn into various sections. And we want to make sure that our content within also is in a kind of fixed and clean way. Now, key things to note, although I am using rounding here, email templates may not necessarily be responsive to rounding. So there are ways for us though to get around that. And that's why we also use basically a block design and we cascade items going down. So depending upon how the program is being put together, we want to make sure you can put together the sections. First of all, we might want to have the top strip. And that top strip can basically have the rounding that we're desiring for the corners. And we will go over here and adjust that down to 0. That can be our top section. And what that does basically means that this here could be, for example, like a vector shape inside of our email showing the top. We also can do the other side, which means that we can have also our bottom at the same time done. And we'll set that to 0, which we can then change and say the bottom. Now we have the top and we have the bottom. We can click both of those two. We can apply our core color. So in the Pixellink Design System, the core color allows us to access all the different types of color and styling values and properties. So you'll find that I'm using this most of the time. Now I'm going to click apply my border, and we can see that it gets this line cut off. So we don't really want that one. So we're going to go here and we're going to take it away. So we can remove the line on that side, meaning that the lines across the top. That means that now we can have a top and bottom strip, and the content that we sit into the middle here will basically fill the container from left to right. That means that we can simply, if we want, we can actually just copy this value, we can copy that style, and we can basically paste that style back onto here. And all that I'll need to do there is just remove these corners. And now we have this centered section. And this basically can be that section in which we can use as basically those in between. So I'm just going to call it a section. And there we go. With that, we actually have some of the core frames that are going to hold the content that we need it to hold. And the core pieces we have, let's say we look at this, and let's kind of reference how this roughly is put together. You can see that we have a gap property. We also have padding 16 and then 24. So let's say our sections have a 24 by 24 at the top and bottom and a 16 on either side. Now you could have more or less. I chose 16 because I know that when it gets to a mobile, ideally I want to maintain that kind of 16 on either side, noting that there's going to, of course, the email is going to sit inside of a bigger and broader frame that will also take up some space also. So let's put that one on. To do that, we'll need to set up an auto layout. I'm going to make the content centered at the top, meaning that content will fix here and remain, or try to remain, centered. I'm going to adjust the gap, and the gap we are going to choose will be the large, and then we're going to go down. We're going to add also the 24 extra large and the 16, so that now we have 24, 24, 16, 16, and it is aligned exactly where we need it to be. Beyond that, depending on how you want to set it up, that is completely up to you, but let's make sure in this scenario, I'm going to make sure that this one will have content that's going down vertically, because this will contain my text. In some scenarios, I'm also going to have another one, and that means we're going to have a different type of section now. So this could be my text section, meaning that the content comes down. Then this can be my actual, my more like media section, which I probably just call this images or cards, which means that now I have this card section. I will then make sure that I actually put it on wrapping so that I can have content wrapping inside of the frame, meaning that there we go. We have a kind of collection of frames that basically allow us to continually put things into it. Now we can start to assemble anything that we really want and chuck them inside of these frames, which is really helpful. So we can just reuse that, and that's why we have some key names set up. By doing so, now it's really much basically making sure that we can think in formulas and create the types of content and blocks. Now, if you're using the Pixellink Design System, you'll already have access to basically our kind of different text block types of configurations. You'll be also able to see some of the other text blocks. Let's say we go to the text over here, and over here we have some header sections and layouts where we also have some of our icon setups and then our text, and we've set them up to respond to fill from left to right, to hug and have certain restrictions, which means that when we build these types of components and then reuse these types of components, they'll have some variations and configurations already pre-built in. For example, swap with the icon to the ability to have a kind of padding, to have some nice structure to the design, and so on. So there are some of those configurations that we have there. And then you'll notice that the Pixellink Design System uses a set of component text blocks and also some grid layouts. Now, these are quite helpful and handy in many ways, but does add to the complexity of design system. So it may or may not be necessary for your case. Though I find it very helpful, so I definitely would advise checking it out and trying it. And what that does for us is, well, let's say we need to get our header. I'm going to go and I'm going to access the header block there. And let's say we're going to create our first section. This will be using that vertical. So I'm just going to do duplicate. What I can do now is I can just chuck in that header. You can see that it changed and snapped to the size. So that's a little bit annoying. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put out a fixed size of 620. So, and what I can here also is just specify 620, and hopefully that remains fixed. So now I have my header text block, happy days. I can just simply duplicate this header text block, and because I have everything in my text blocks or my blocks in one place, I can swap them out. I can even just go and type body and swap it out with the body. The body will have everything that I need in the frame, and also I can center that one. I'm going to fill it from left to right, and I will do the same for the header, and I can use that center aligned version. And this is where you can actually start to create some of your variants if you desire. Down the bottom here, I'm going to switch this one to either a weak or a medium. I'm going to use a weak, and this will basically mean that I get something like that right there. You'll notice at the top here, I want to try to achieve this image, and I also want to have some other image just overlapping it there. To do so, I'll need to create a section that I can have that put together. Now, I actually may still use this because I'm only going to have a singular one, but I will use my block here. I'm going to actually just change this to banner. Now I have a banner, I can do that, I can remove, and what I have part of the system is also a image card. So I should be able to grab my image card, which I can throw into here, and with my image card I can fill the container that contain it. So now I have this image card section, and I'll be able to do the different types of image card things with it, but we're not going to bother too much with that. So now that we have our banner section, what we're going to be doing is we'll focus on creating that object that's going to go over the top here, and that can be basically a part of the image. Now you can either bake it into the image, or you can use a overlay to section it over the top. So in this scenario, we're going to just use that kind of overlay item, which means that we're going to have a fixed frame. That fixed frame will then have a secondary frame which will hold, for example, that image. We're going to grab that image frame, I'm going to center it, and what I can do is I can use this, set my order layout, and I don't need to worry too hard about this entire item. Now I will probably keep the same styling of this item here, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy that styling there, I will paste it in here. And I can apply, for example, the color. I will use the border, and I will also use a particular number. For the Pixellink Design System, we could, for example, let's say set something like that. we can use the appearance to, let's say, override it to a round. It just gives us a bit more flexibility because we didn't set it to a round by default. Technically, we have a neutral kind of square shape here. And then we have the choice of round, also a choice of just a direct square, which gives us a little bit more flexibility with our templates. So that is just that. Otherwise, you can create it fixed yourself. We will use the frame, but we will remove that background. So now we'll basically be able to insert and kind of put it over the top there. Before we do so, though, I will name the section. I will call this the overlay, and I will specify that this overlay will have the graphic. There we go. And I can either replace the background and have it as an image, or I can leave the background, which is what I'll be doing, and then have a actual item that will be inserted into here as the image or as the shape. At the moment, we have these vector shapes. I'm just going to use that directly inside, but basically you could either use a vector shape like what I'm doing, or you can end up using an actual different image itself entirely, or just a full image to fill the entire container. If you use a full image, make sure that you have clipping on. So we will leave that, and I will probably keep it at a fixed ratio, but set it. And now that it is like that, I will be setting, well, this is auto layout, so that's great. I will make sure that my icon here, I actually fix my icon into position. And I'm going to make sure that it adjusts from the top and bottom, but ideally remains centered. So if this was to adjust, it will adjust the icon inside, but it will not adjust the icon if I stretch it and squash it. So that works out lovely. I will reduce this, but I'm going to keep obviously the same ratio, like so. All right, now before I do anything, I will remove that, and I am going to bring it out to the center. Now that I have this, I know that I'm going to check it over the top, but I will actually turn this into a component right now. And that's just because I might want to adjust that. So that's why I'm not going to put it inside. Now, when I do put it inside, I can, of course, make it fill from left to right. So that's all fine. But you can see that it sits down here when I kind of want it to sit into the image a bit more. The image, at the moment, I can set the height, and I will set the height. So I'll set the height to 45, and I can use the 245 either to basically use a bit of maths here, or I can use the 160. I'll probably actually use the 160, I think, because I want the 160 and I want it to go up by so. And then I also have this 16 padding. Now, obviously, we do have this, but what we want to do is we want to get the 160, which we could do some maths. You go 160 divided by 2, and then plus the half of the 16, which would be the 8, and then I would say negative, which will do the maths for me, which is fantastic, because now we've basically moved it right into position where we want it to be. So that would be a way. Actually, I think I did it slightly wrong. Let me review. Yes. So it would have been minus 160 divided by 2 minus 8. There we go. So now we have this section, we have this banner, we have this image, we control the image sits over the top, reverses over the top of the other image because we are using a negative gap. Now we've set up our banner can link to our header section just below, which means that now we have these components, which I can simply turn that into a component, turn that one into a component, and the items inside of the component, like the nested items, like the header, and that's why I like these header blocks, so I can actually just promote those, which means that once they're promoted, I can see all the adjustments that I can do for my header, body, happy days. Now I have those, I can get onto my next section. Now my next section actually here, I would say is actually probably the only section that you might want to consider, more being just kind of a dynamic section. Being dynamic means that you will detach this section, and that's okay, because that's what it's made for. So we will, for example, we'll grab that text block section here, I'll move it over here, and I could call this text header section. Now I can have down the bottom here that body section. I will copy across this one and I'll just duplicate it. But what we have and why we're separating it is because in most scenarios, you're going to probably introduce and say hi. And you're going to have some material. So it's always happy to basically have at least some. I usually either we look at about 3 kind of text blocks, and really we can actually just set these to be like so. Now, because these are just text blocks, I can actually label them and give them basically a different name. Now I got, I guess at the moment, 3 here, but maybe I want 4 or 5, who knows. But what I can do now is I can go Control R, Command R, and you can now call these text slots. And then we can do text slots, and we can make sure that we chuck in a number. So we have that number on it. I'm going to undo so, and we'll quickly add a separation between them. Like that. Beautiful. What this does is it means it kind of overrides the asset, and in the sense that it overrides in the sense of an instance. Now the instance is referred to as the text slot 01, which is great because it being text slot 01 means that I can go here and I can have all of the stuff for the text slot control for the visibility in the asset. So I could actually go here, turn this into an asset. I can click it as an asset, and I can now go and add it, and it says show text slot 01. So I could either leave the label completely as is, or in my case, I will remove those items. I like to keep those in for code translation purposes, but only on the names. But when I'm, of course, putting together the properties, I like to keep it simple. So we want to make sure that this can just be a simple, clean name. So show text slot 2. We'll go through and basically be able to add these as the text slot showing and hiding labels, which basically gives us a whole bunch of freedom when using this asset. If you're ever wanting to learn anything more about the slots and how to create slots and use slots in your designs, feel free, comment in the description box below. Happy to share some more videos and content on the method. So here we are, we have that. Now we can basically switch them on and off, and we can even attach other items to it. The section responds to the top and bottom, hugs the content, and the content fills the container, and the text in it fills like so. So now I basically have a dynamic section, And I can click on the top here, and because I have these slots like so, I can also promote the nested items because they're also renamed. I can actually see the names of them here. I have one shown. I can tick the other one on. Now I have number 2, and that one's the next one shown, which means that I can adjust the sizing like so, which is great. But I can also adjust certain types of alignment and how the kind of content is showing and what text is in the content itself. But it also allows me one extra thing, because what I can do here also, so I can click on this asset, I can also assign other types of instances that it can switch out with. So I can add in those types of instances if I like. For example, I can add a header. I can add a title, which I can grab my title text block. I could add my paragraph text block, and I could add my label. I could add my, it could be amounts. I could add in my number block. And this is why I like using these blocks. Why I find them helpful is because we can basically have these different types of assets that we can insert here. Now I have a much more powerful and flexible dynamic component. So I can call this my text slot asset. That means that I can click here when I have that available, and I can switch it now to a header. And because I have my controls in my header, I can now be able to adjust the item. Let's go up here, press enter. Let's make sure that we can just simply switch in like so. So there we go. That is basically allowing us to have flexibility of a very powerful text section where we'll be able to start to add in those additional items. I guess a few other items that I make sure that I add in would be the dot points and the icon indent points. So if you add those in and you set that up basically per one of these assets, then you'll have the flexibility to change out each of the items and slots, any item and slot in it, giving you a completely flexible section to work with. Finally, we will basically grab our avatar component and we can set this asset up next. All right, so let's start and build out this section. Like our text block above, though, this section here is a kind of a collection of 2 assets, and we've got our avatar component. So what we can do over here is we can leverage the existing frames that we got. Now we do have this one, and we can copy that one across. This will be the kind of avatar section, and we can go and grab our avatar asset. So let's open up our asset panel, and I can grab that and drag it in. Now, I already have a actual title section component. Basically, what I have with my title section component is my title, and I have this text block here. What I can just double check, always handy, make sure that text is filling the container from left to right. The text is filling the container from left to right, and then the containers should ideally be filling from left to right. the container, for example, here, and the reason why we also using these wrappers is more so that the containers can fix the content within and they can define. So if you wanted, for example, make sure that text has truncation, for example, then it can have truncation because the container defines the size. Sometimes you want to have a little bit more control. Also, let's show you a couple of tips and tricks that you can do. Now, I have this standard title section and this standard body text section, but obviously that doesn't look like what I have down here. So we can duplicate this, and this is a way that we can put some overrides onto the text to this asset component. We've used, for example, a variable here. We can remove the gap. So now we've removed the gap, so that's great. I can add this into here, but still I may not want to really have that large giant title text. So that's where I can use the configurations to drop that down to 4. I can also use the same configurations to also drop the body text down to 4 too, meaning that now they both are using that smaller version. I can adjust the actual, for example, text color by moving that down to a weaker value, and I want to add in the label. Now, what I use is a collection of variables that are utilities-like variables that provide certain helpers in scenarios like this one. I have a collection of names, so I can select the text here, and I can have the capacity to basically go to the component or go to the master parent component over here, which is what I'm going to do. I can find the title text. So I have text, and then I can go and assign a variable. I can go and look up a name because I actually have all of the usernames in there. Now I have this Matthew Seer basically applied here, but we can also use the same method to apply it down the bottom. But we'll also notice once I've done so, it's only applied the exact same Matthew Seer, but it's also some handy little things you can set up. And my modes and my utilities with the names, I have basically the name, but then I also have the other relevant properties in the alternate modes for naming. So I can go to my appearance and I can specify on the container that contains the text block, the body text block container, I can go to my actual usernames in here. I can then specify that I want either my email or my handle. So I can say, oh, show the handle, or I can get it to show the email. In this scenario, I'll just leave the handle there. That is the kind of power you can set up with some utility variables to switch between a few options, keeping them together basically, and allowing you to easily assign those text elements into your design. That also allows me as well to easily swap them out with other labels and other names. Overall, I have now set this up. I have this asset and component. I can fill the container, it pushes everything across. Because all of the items are already set up here and it's completely responsive and so on, then this asset has been done and created. If I like, I can now expose the nested properties to the kind of asset, meaning that now both of those sub assets inside of it are all exposed and they're linked up with the text block names, allowing me to be able to switch those across to another name. As you can see over here, by the way, we also have the collection of same names, which if we wanted to, we could also specify the Matthew, which will select that one. So there we go, set that one up. And days, let's move on to the last one, the last two. We need to get the icon set here, and I'm going to grab that actual collection of icons. I will use the same here. I'm just going to copy them in. I'm just going to paste, actually, duplicate that, paste them directly in there. Now I have those icons. I'm going to rename them, use the current name, add a dash, add the number, like so, or it's perfectly fine. I'm going to make sure that this can be a component. I will call this the social and buttons. There we go. So now we have our social button section. We have our buttons, and we can as well go through and basically put them on a show and hide, giving ourselves some options with the configuration, which is great. And each social actual option will be able to switch from the social buttons that we have, or the social icons that we have in the system. Plus, it also gives you easier building blocks than having to have very hard set large assets. So now, there we go. We've propagated those across. Let's also make sure that we allow to access them. And by doing so, now we can switch them out with the other platforms as needed, and also switch the styling. So we can switch styling, switch the platforms, show a certain number, up to 4, of course. And there we go. We've got our social button section. Finally, we want to have this last little section here, which basically contains some of our button links, which is nice and easy. We can grab this one. We'll call this the footer. Inside our footer section, obviously, we want to maintain the text. Actually, what I can do is I'll show you how we can, for example, like take something like this and reuse it. But let's do that actually. So I can actually select and duplicate this, which makes life a lot easier because now I can just duplicate the component. I didn't need to technically have these as variants, so I will remove them out of their variants. We'll add the slash in the default part of it. I don't really mind. I will just remove those. But the difference with this, obviously, is that this is going to now turn into that footer section, as was said before. It basically means that now with this one here, that I will basically propagate all of the pre-configured assets that I had from prior, which is exactly what I want. I don't actually want to basically redo this here. I want to keep it as is. I like the slots, I like all the other bits and pieces that it has. The only one difference that I'm going to do is I will center it, and I'm going to drop it down to a weak, so, or maybe even a medium, probably a medium. Let's give it a medium. And now that it's like so, that's happy, good. We will go grab our link asset. This is a link button asset that we have in the system. We'll be able to drop that in. I can actually put a frame around it. I'm going to call this the button section, and with the button section I can press enter, and I can control D or command D and duplicate. So I can go shift enter to go back up, and I can change the orientation so that it's going vertical. I will fill this from left to right. I will center the assets in the middle. So now that I have those, what I can do, and like what I've done before, I select those and I can rename them, and I will add the numbers to them. I'll do the same sort of thing where we can also set them up so you can also have the ability to do the kind of showing and hiding. I do have 3. So what I can do is actually just kind of reuse more, so repurpose potentially. Actually, I won't repurpose, I'll leave them. Just because it's easier to actually just take the names. So let's grab that. Just press plus. Great, I'll use that. Those, and I can select the next one. And I can select the next one. So I can click on the top here. I can expose the nested items here, which will basically give me all of the properties that my nested buttons. So my nested buttons have this label property, but they also have their sizing, and they have their states and so on. And they can also access the icons and the dual icons and all that sort of stuff. So if you want icons and so on, you can. So now we have basically this asset, which fulfills, and finally, tying it all the way back from the beginning, we do have the actual logo component, and that's why we can also separate them so that we could technically have them in 2 places. It makes life a lot easier. So I'll just add that in to the bottom like so, and ultimately that is my asset logo, which I will be able to select. And if you do want to kind of provide it as an asset, they can kind of be switched in and out. You can also set up any sort of visibility for that logo as well. So there we have it. We have now that footer section, and we also have our social media section, and we have these top strip, bottom strip, and we also have and really now it is honestly just using the assets and creating the different templates that you need. There are also other situations where you might want, for example, card layouts where you're going to have a card, and then you're also going to have those other cards in the block itself, and just have those alternative layouts. But I'd recommend going through, starting off, build out your collection of these kind of essential core collection of assets. Once you kind of have those tools that you built out for yourself with the kind of smaller components, you'll be able to start then quickly blocking these together into various different email templates that you need based off of the kind of either service blueprint or your any sort of design flow blueprints you've mapped out. Going into the next video, I'll be going through where we can then start to take some of these assets that we put together, these templates, and then start to put together a flow, building out a product with our design system. I hope you found this video helpful for you. Please let me know in the description box below what's worked, what doesn't work, and also what else you'd like to see and learn about as we go through the journey together. And again, please like, subscribe, and if you want to help out the channel, you'll be able to check out the Pixellink Design System Proteus in the description box below with the discount code. And until next time, design thinkers, keep thinking, keep building, keep creating amazing things, and I will see you all in the next video. All right, thank you. Bye.